I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president, who happens also to be a Catholic.
Hello, everyone. We're back today for another session on the 6th of February, 2022. I'm joined here with Michael in Germany, and I'm here in Minnesota. And we are about to embark again on this journey into the conspiracy script with Michael. Michael, welcome.
Welcome, Brett. Welcome, dear listeners. This is now the 9th session of what the Bible tells us about conspiracies. And of course, it's about JFK. We are taking the shortcut because we could have gone into several conspiracies before, like you have seen in the intro, for example, the gunpowder plot. But I think that Jörg, for example, had made sessions about that. I'm not sure if Tom Friess has gotten into it, but I don't want to be repetitive here, and I want to have shining some other lights, because the situation which occurred on the presidency, or during the presidency and before the presidency and after the presidency of John F. Kennedy is quite interesting if you compare that to the actual situation. Of course, when you ask an historian, they will always say that, okay, that will take a little time because you have to go back and then to sort out all the facts. So you cannot do it on the current situation because you don't get the information and so soon. And it's also a method, I think, that somebody puts out a lie and then you have to research it to come to the truth. And in the meantime, while you are researching, they are publishing and producing another lie and another lie and another lie. So you cannot keep up. You know, there's an old quote from Mark Twain, who was also a member of the Freemason, and he says that lie travels several times around the earth unless the truth is putting on his shoes. And that's really the dilemma in it. So we cannot do that in the same way that somebody is promoting a lie. So that's quite easy. But to uncover things, that takes a real amount of time and research. So, session 9 of conspiracies. What is to be expected? Of course, the item, once again, is John F. Kennedy. I was very pleased when Jörg found that photo from the late 1930s, where the entire family of Kennedy then were having a visit to the Vatican. So you see here Joe Sr., you see here his wife, you see John F. Kennedy, the later president, you see Robert F. Kennedy, and you see little Ted Kennedy, or Edward. Yeah. So you see all the family together in the Vatican. It's a black and white picture, but you see, of course, here the Swiss guards for the Vatican, for the lifeguards or bodyguards of the Pope, and of course Swiss, because Switzerland has been founded by the Papal Knights in about 1310, after they were banned in 1302 officially by the Pope. Yeah, and so that also must be the reason that Switzerland is very, very wealthy, high educated, and was not affected in any way during World War I and World War II. Switzerland was one of the only countries who were not affected by any losses because they are so-called neutral, a neutral country, which never belonged to the NATO, to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or to the Warsaw Pact, or to the Western Hemisphere, or to the Eastern Bloc, or to any kind of a political system. They were independent or neutral. So, once again, I would like to remind you something what we have done and what we have told about in the last session. That was a phrase here, that the Joe Jr., so the supposed president, that he was, where's Joe Jr.? He must be the one who was taking the picture because he's not depicted here.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah, that could be, huh?
Could be, right.
Yeah, he's got 4 sons, but I only see 3, so therefore...
Right, that very well could be.
Okay, so but there is here a quote. Joe Jr.'s years of intellectual challenge included a trip to Moscow and Socratic lessons, where Lasky posed questions to him that end with, "What will you do about this when you are president. Yeah, so that was absolutely clear. It was an elite training ground, and if Joe Jr. returned home a bit more liberal than his father, his devout Catholicism remained intact. He made his first trip to the continent to see the Pope and dutifully reported to his mother that he had, quoted, climbed the holy stairs of St. Peter's on my knees. So much for devout Catholicism. And we know that he died during a secret mission or a secret plane flight during 1944. So therefore, it was the task of becoming president was handed over to John F. Kennedy, or the short abbreviation was Jack. And that's where we are going into now. I went across a documentary. I'm looking much to documentaries because sometimes other people have other valid points. And this usualhistory.com documentary says there had been only one Catholic with the nominated for president, and that was Al Smith, the New York governor. And we have talked about that before, that he also had an Irish heritage. And it was 1928 when he ran for president. Of course, it was much too early for that. It was more than 10 years before the Second World War even. So that documentary also says, when John F. Kennedy applied for becoming president, there were all kind of rumors that Kennedy would really rule through the Vatican. Yeah, and here you see that it has been depicted here prominently. It's just a 3-minute short video that Kennedy would really rule through the Vatican. So that was the fear. That, of course, was the same fear in the discussion of 1928 with Al Smith. Yeah, but I think that's a valid point. Yeah, but he says, speaking of John F. Kennedy, that he will not accept the dictates of the Pope as a president. Yeah, that's the very quote. September the 12th, not 11th, September the 12th, 1960 in Houston, Texas. Once again in Texas. He says, I am not the Catholic candidate for president. You see, it is a difficult position for him coming out of an extremely devout Roman Catholic family. At the same time, applying for the highest official job in the United States. He needed the votes of both Catholic and Protestants to become the president. So I suppose that he had to make ends meet. And that's the task. You cannot serve two masters. We know that. And so therefore he had the very difficult task coming out of a Roman Catholic background with all the ties to even the Archbishop of New York, Cardinal Spellman, which was a personal friend of his father, Joe Kennedy Sr., and then to apply for the official president of the United States and telling the people that he would not accept any dictate or any interference from the papacy. Yeah, and so we are going into this very speech today because that is a very interesting document from 1960. That was the time when his father still was in charge. We know that his father was paralyzed in late 1961, if I remember correctly, Brett, it was in December. Mm-hmm. So let's go in to this website called American Rhetoric Online Speech, John F. Kennedy, Greater Houston Ministerial Association Question and Answers. 12th of September 1916 at the Rice Hotel in Houston, Texas. This is a part of his campaign of becoming elected president. This is before he was elected, of course. So that was a very important task for John F. Kennedy. Being confronted with Protestants coming out of a Roman devout Catholic family with the background of the pressure of his father wanted him to become the first Catholic president. And now we will see with question and answer where I will play the part of the interrogator and Brett will play the part of President Kennedy. So we cannot...
Michael, I just looked up the term ministerial association. And you know the first thing it says on Google when you look it up? Listen, a ministerial association is an ecumenical Christian group that is active on the local level.
Mm-hmm.
Ecumenical.
Mm-hmm.
Just thought we'd point that out quick.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very valid contribution. When these people are being presented, they are being presented with their titles. So when we see that, oh, this is Pastor so-and-so from that church, so-and-so and so. Yeah, let's face it. We do not know what is staged. We do not know if John F. Kennedy knew the questions beforehand. I don't know that actually. But I think that more interesting than the questions are the answers of Kennedy, because it is about his faith, where the people would like to find out if he is capable or would be capable of being the president of the United States. We are talking about 1960 here. We are not talking about 2020. So it is more than 60 years ago. Nevertheless, I find that very interesting and key for understanding what actually troubled Mr. Kennedy. And yeah, let's go into it.
I'm grateful for your generous invitation to state my views. While the so-called religious issue is necessarily and properly the chief topic here tonight, I want to emphasize from the outset that I believe that we have far more critical issues in the 1960 campaign. The spread of communist influence until it now festers only 90 miles from the coast of Florida. The humiliating treatment of our president and vice president by those who no longer respect our power. The hungry children I saw in West Virginia. The old people who cannot pay their doctor's bills. The families forced to give up their farms. An America with too many slums, with too few schools, and too late to the moon and outer space. These are the real issues which should decide this campaign. And they are not religious issues. For war and hunger and ignorance and despair know no religious barrier. But because I am a Catholic, and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issues in this campaign have been obscured, perhaps deliberately, in some quarters less responsible than this. So it is apparently necessary for me to state once again, not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all. For while this year it may be a Catholic against whom the finger of suspicion is pointed, in other years it has been, and may someday be again, a Jew, or a Quaker, or a Unitarian, or a Baptist. It was Virginia's harassment of Baptist preachers, for example, that led to Jefferson's Statute of Religious Freedom. Today I may be the victim, but tomorrow it may be you, until the whole fabric of our harmonious society is ripped apart at a time of great national peril. Finally, I believe in an America where religious intolerance will someday end, where all men and all churches are treated as equals, where every man has the same right to attend or not to attend the church of his choice, where there is no Catholic vote, no anti-Catholic vote, no block voting of any kind, and where Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, at both the lay and the pastoral levels, will refrain from those attitudes of disdain and division which have so often marred their works in the past, and promote instead the American ideal of brotherhood. That is the kind of America in which I believe, and it represents the kind of presidency in which I believe. A great office that must be neither humbled by making it the instrument of any religious group, nor tarnished by arbitrarily withholding its occupancy from the members of any one religious group. I believe in a president whose views on religion are his own private affair, neither imposed upon him by the nation, nor imposed by the nation upon him as a condition to holding that office. I would not look with favor upon a president working to subvert the First Amendment's guarantees of religious liberty, nor would our system of checks and balances permit him to do so. And neither do I look with favor upon those who would work to subvert Article 6 of the Constitution by requiring a religious test, even by indirection. For if they disagree with that safeguard, they should be openly working to repeal it. I want a chief executive whose public acts are responsible to all and obligated to none, who can attend any ceremony, service, or dinner his office may appropriately require him to fulfill, and whose fulfillment of his presidential office is not limited or conditioned by any religious oath, ritual, or obligation. This is the kind of America I believe in, and this is the kind of America I fought for in the South Pacific, and the kind my brother died for in Europe. No one suggested then that we might have a divided loyalty, that we did not believe in liberty, or that we belonged to a disloyal group that threatened, I quote, the freedoms for which our forefathers died. And in fact, this is the kind of America for which our forefathers did die, when they fled here to escape religious test oaths that denied office to members of less favored churches, when they fought for the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, and when they fought at the shrine I visited today, the Alamo. For side by side with Bowie and Crockett died Fuentes and McCafferty and Bailey and Bedillo and Carey, but no one knows whether they were Catholics or not, for there was no religious test there. I ask you tonight to follow in that tradition, to judge me on the basis of 14 years in the Congress, on my declared stands against an ambassador to the Vatican, against unconstitutional aid to parochial schools, and against any boycott of the public schools, which I attended myself. And instead of doing this, do not judge me on the basis of these pamphlets and publications. We have all seen that carefully select quotations out of context from the statements of Catholic Church leaders, usually in other countries, frequently in other centuries, and rarely relevant to any situation here, and always omitting, of course, the statement of the American bishops in 1948, which strongly endorsed church-state separation, and which more nearly reflects the views of almost every American Catholic. I do not consider these other quotations binding upon my public acts. Why should you? But let me say, with respect to other countries, that I am wholly opposed to the state being used by any religious group, Catholic or Protestant, to compel, prohibit, or prosecute the free exercise of any other religion. And that goes for any persecution at any time by anyone in any country. And I hope that you and I condemn with equal fervor those nations which deny their presidency to Protestants and those which deny it to Catholics. And rather than cite the misdeeds of those who differ, I would also cite the record of the Catholic Church in such nations as France and Ireland, and the independence of such statesmen as de Gaulle and Adenauer. But let me stress again that these are my views. For contrary to common newspaper usage, I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president, who happens also to be a Catholic. I do not speak for my church on public matters, and the church does not speak for me. Whatever issue may come before me as president, if I should be elected, on birth control, divorce, censorship, gambling, or any other subject, I will make my decision in accordance with these views, in accordance with what my conscience tells me to be in the national interest, and without regard to outside religious pressure or dictates. And no power or threat of punishment could cause me to decide otherwise. But if the time should ever come, and I do not concede any conflict to be remotely possible, when my office would require me to either violate my conscience or violate the national interest, then I would resign the office, and I hope any other conscientious public servant would do likewise. But I do not intend to apologize for these views to my critics of either Catholic or Protestant faith, nor do I intend to disavow either my views or my church in order to win this election. If I should lose on the real issues, I shall return to my seat in the Senate, satisfied that I tried my best and was fairly judged. But if this election is decided on the basis that 40 million Americans lost their chance of being president on the day they were baptized, then it is the whole nation that will be the loser in the eyes of Catholics and non-Catholics around the world, in the eyes of history, and in the eyes of our own people. But if, on the other hand, I should win this election, then I shall devote every effort of mind and spirit to fulfilling the oath of the presidency, practically identical, I might add, with the oath I have taken for 14 years in the Congress. For without reservation, I can, and I quote, solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, so help me God.
So this is a certified session. This is also available as MP3 and it is available as a PDF. So we will not alter anything. We will tell you that in that context that Mr. Kennedy answered. So first question. The introducer, so the host here, not any interrogator. Due to the press of time, we should begin immediately with the question and answer period. You know the ground rules. So that means that Kennedy has held a speech before into the questions and answers. So question. Senator Kennedy, I'm Glenn Norman, pastor of Second Baptist Church in Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi is Latin, means the body of Christ. I think I speak for many that do not in any sense discount or in any sense doubt your loyalty and your love to this nation or your position that's in accord with our position in regard to the separation of church and state. You see, that is the absolute valid point here right at the beginning. But could I bring it down to where we stand right here tonight as two men of just nearly equal in age, just standing facing each other? If this meeting tonight were being held in the sanctuary of my church, it's the policy in my city that has many very fine Catholics in it, but it's the policy of Catholic leadership to forbid them to attend a Catholic Protestant service. If we tonight were in the sanctuary of my church, just right as we are, would you and could you attend as you have here? Speaking about the Second Baptist Church. Now comes the answer of Mr. Kennedy.
Well, yes, I could. I can attend any, as I said in my statement. I would attend any service in the interest that had any connection with my public office, or in the case of private ceremony, weddings, funerals, and so on. Of course, I would participate and have participated. I think the only question would be whether I could participate as a participant, a believer in your faith, and maintain my membership in my church. That, it seems to me, comes with the private beliefs that a Catholic might have. But as far as whether I could attend this sort of function in your church, whether as a senator or president could attend a function in your service connected with my position of office, then I could attend and would attend.
So you see that is not the major deal here. He's answering very politely here. Question. Closely allied to it was the position in regard to the chapel of the chaplains that was dedicated and which I believe you once had accepted the invitation to attend. And then the press said, I believe that Cardinal Doughty brought pressure and you refused and did not attend.
I will be delighted to explain. That seems to be a matter of great interest. I was invited in 1947 after my election to the Congress by Dr. Poling to attend a dinner to raise funds for an interfaith chapel in honor of the 4 chaplains who went down to Dorchester. This was 14 years ago. I was delighted to accept because I thought it was a useful and worthwhile cause. A few days before I was due to accept, I learned through my administrative assistant who had friends in Philadelphia 2 things. First, that I was listed, and this is in Dr. Poling's book, in which he describes the incident as the spokesman for the Catholic faith at the dinner. Charles Taft, Senator Taft's brother, was to be the spokesman for the Protestant faith. Senator Lehman was to be the spokesman for the Jewish faith. The second thing I learned was that the chapel, instead of being located as I thought it was as an interfaith chapel, was located in the basement of another church. It was not in that sense an interfaith chapel, and for the 14 years that chapel was built, there has never been a service of my church because of the physical location. I therefore informed Dr. Poling that while I would be glad to come as a citizen, in fact, many Catholics did go to the dinner, I did not feel that I had very good credentials to attend as the spokesman for the Catholic faith at the dinner to raise funds when the whole Catholic Church group in Philadelphia were not participating and because the chapel has never been blessed or consecrated. Now, I want to make it clear that my grounds for not going were private. I had no credentials to speak for the Catholic faith at a dinner for a chapel which has never, in which no Catholic service has ever been held. So that, and to this day, unfortunately, no service has been held at the present time. But I think if I may separate that, if this were a public matter, I told you, Dr. Poling, I'd be glad to go as an individual, but I could not go as a spokesman on that occasion.
Senator Kennedy, Canon Rutenbar of Christ Church here in Houston. I have read this platform and the planks in it with great interest, especially in the realms of freedom. And I know that in the educational section, the right of education for each person is guaranteed or offered for a guarantee. It also says that there shall be equal opportunity for employment. In another section, it says there shall be equal rights to housing and recreation. All of these speak, I think, in a wonderful sense to the freedom which we want to keep here in America. Yet, on the other hand, there is another place in the platform. These words, quote, we will repeal the authorization for right-to-work laws, unquote. Now, it seems to me that in this aspect here, I feel that these are much more important than any religious issue. Here you are abolishing an open shop. You are taking away the freedom of the individual worker, whether he wants to work and wants to belong to this union or not. Now, isn't this sort of double talk? You're guaranteeing freedom on one hand, and yet you're going to take it away on the other?
No, I don't agree with that.
I think there's a dichotomy here in the platform.
Well, that provision has been in the platform since 1948, and I am sure there is a difference of opinion between us on that matter, and between many Democrats on that matter. But I think that it's a decision which goes to the economic and political views. I don't think it involves a constitutional guarantee of freedom. In other words, under the provisions of the Taft-Hartley law, a state was permitted to prohibit a union shop, but it was not permitted to guarantee a closed shop. Now, my own judgment is that uniformity in interstate commerce is valuable, and therefore I hold with that view that it's better to have uniform laws and not a law which is in interstate commerce. And these are all, this is not intrastate, but interstate commerce, which permits one condition in one state and in another. This is not a new provision. It's been in for the last 3 platforms.
Yeah, so that was not that much of interest, I think, but it's becoming more intense soon.
Sure.
Question. Max Dahlke, president of Gulf Coast Bible College and pastor of First Church of God here in Houston, and I'm a member, Mr. Meza, of the Houston Associate of Ministers. Mr. Kennedy, you very clearly stated your position tonight in regard to the propagation of the gospel by all religious groups in other countries. I appreciated that much because we Protestants are a missionary people. Oh, very interesting sentence.
Uh-oh.
Huh?
Big mistake.
We should explain. I think we really should explain. I don't know if there are somebody who are just being here for the first time or so. Yeah. So mission means sending abroad as an agent originally from Jesuits. Yeah. You see these missionaries. Yeah, they wanted to spread the faith, but with the sword, because the Jesuits is military. It's regimini militantis ecclesia. So it's military.
That's right.
It's military of the church.
Order of the church. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a really shame when a Protestant uses the missionary term, and they do on a regular basis without thinking about it. And believe me, I've used it too. I have to rethink everything now. And that's the problem with Jesuitism, is that it indeed is like a cancer, and it just eats away. And it's eating away the Protestant faith. That's the point. So here, this Protestant is actually telling you to your face that we have Jesuit principles in our policy, which is a big danger. It should be weeded out. You should not use, it should be, we Protestants are bringing the gospel to the people. That's what it should read. We're talking about the old path, the gospel of the old path, the historical knowledge that's been eradicated, Michael.
Yeah, that's actually, you can read that sentence in 2 ways. The first way is the exoteric. He says, I appreciated that much because we Protestants are a missionary people. And in the esoteric meaning, it means I appreciate that much because we Protestants are Jesuitical people.
There you go. There's another way to say it. Yep. And that might seem pretty harsh for many of us that are attached to these terms, because our church uses the mission constantly. They're always going on missions. They're talking about missionary work. We're spreading the gospel.
Of course, the word is older than the Jesuits. Please don't get us wrong here. But you see, it has been used since 1590, since more than 400 years, as a term describing agents of Jesuit.
Right. Mission is not in the Bible. Let's put it that way. It's not a biblical term. Yeah,
but it's not a word which has been invented by the Jesuits, I think. So that therefore, just to clear it, absolutely stated, absolutely clear, to make it absolutely clear, this word is in use as meaning as sending out Jesuitical agents to missionary the people in a Jesuitical way since 1590s. However, the question I have to ask is this: if you are elected president, will you use your influence to get the Roman Catholic countries of South America, meaning Latin America, by of course, due to the cause that in the older times, the Dominicans, for example, they had missionaries, and many other people also. You see, the Dominican Republic has been created by Dominicans, of course. Yeah. So once again, will you use your influence to get the Roman Catholic countries of South America and Spain to stop persecuting Protestant missionaries? Oh, wow. What a word. And to give equal rights to Protestants to propagate their faith as the United States gives to the Roman Catholics or any other group. Yeah, you see that when you know that to propagate comes from propaganda, yeah, we have to go into this too.
Yes.
They are using actually Catholic words or Jesuitical words. Yeah, propaganda means a committee of cardinals in charge of foreign mission of the Catholic Church.
See, propagation, it says at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, see, propagation.
There you go.
Yeah, of course, that's just a noun. Yeah, propagation, the causing of plants of animals to reproduce. Yeah, but from Latin propagationem, nominative propagatio. Yeah, and once again.
Yeah, the propagation of the faith. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, but propaganda as itself, not propagation, but propaganda, would mean cardinals in charge of the Roman Catholic Church. Yeah, so by accident or on purpose, I don't know, they are using these Latin words.
Oh, isn't this interesting? Down here it reads, hence any movement or organization to propagate some practice or ideology from 1790. The modern political sense, dissemination of information intended to promote a political point of view, dates from World War I, not originally purgative and implying basis deliberate or misleading, meaning the material or information propagated to advance a cause, etc.
It's from 1920.
1929. What
Yeah,
happened in
that's-
1929, Michael?
Yeah.
February 11.
Yeah. A
Creation of the
certain,
Vatican City State.
yeah, a certain Mussolini. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting, huh?
Very interesting.
Very interesting. 1929. What a coincidence.
Oh, there's a lot more to that one. There's a lot more to that one.
So that is the question. If Mr. Kennedy would be elected president, would he use his influence to get the Roman Catholic countries of South America and Spain to stop persecuting Protestants? As well as the United States gives that service to Roman Catholics or any other group, so Jews or I don't know what. Yeah. That now comes the answer of Senator Kennedy.
I would use my influence as President of the United States to encourage the development of freedom all over the world. One of the rights which I consider to be important is the right of free speech, the right of assembly, the right of free religious practice, and I would hope that the United States and the President would stand for those rights all around the globe without regard to geography or religion or political traditions.
Mm-hmm. It could very well be that the questions were known in advance, huh?
It could be.
Could be, yeah. But what does he tell you here? He does tell you here that I consider to be important is the right of free speech. Can you imagine that speech in 2022?
No.
The right of assembly in 2022? Can you imagine how much changed in 60 years?
Well, you have to remember, this was not that long after World War II. Within 20 years. Not even 20 years had passed since the end of World War II.
Yeah,
so I think the people were pretty sick of the killing. But here we are in 2022.
Yeah, but the right of free speech, you see that nowadays you also all got these restrictions and censorship.
Everywhere you go, you have restrictions. Yeah.
You see that this speech would not be unthinkable in 2022 now. The right of free speech, the right of assembly, the right of free religious practice so far is guaranteed in the First Amendment in the United States. So that's the answer. Now comes the question. Senator Kennedy, this is E.H. Westmoreland, pastor of the South Main Baptist Church here in Houston. I have received today a copy of resolution passed by the Baptist Pastors Conference of St. Louis, and they're going to confront you with this tomorrow night. I would like you to answer to the Houston crowd before you get to St. Louis. This is the resolution. With deep sincerity and in Christian grace, we plead with Senator John F. Kennedy as the person presently concerned in this matter to appeal to Cardinal Cushing, Mr. Kennedy's own hierarchical superior in Boston, to present to the Vatican Mr. Kennedy's sincere statement relative to the separation of church and state in the United States and religious freedom as represented in the Constitution of the United States, in order that the Vatican may officially authorize such a belief for all Roman Catholics in the state. Yeah, Mr. Kennedy's own hierarchical superior, of course, that's in a clergy way, in Boston, to represent the Vatican's Mr. Kennedy's sincere statement to the separation of church and state in the United States. You see, in a nutshell, that's the same fear the people had as in 1928 with the presidential run of Alfred E. Smith. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it all. Now comes the answer of the Senator John F. Kennedy.
May I just say that as I do not accept the right of any, as I said, ecclesiastical official to tell me what I shall do in the sphere of my public responsibility as an elected official, I do not propose also to ask Cardinal Cushing to ask the Vatican to take some action. I do not propose to interfere with their free right to do exactly what they want. There is no doubt in my mind that the viewpoint that I have expressed tonight publicly represents the opinion of the overwhelming majority of American Catholics. And I think that what my view, I have no doubt, is known to Catholics around the world. I'm just hopeful that by my stating it quite precisely, and I believe I state it in the tradition of the American Catholics way back all the way to Bishop John Carroll, I feel that I hope this will clarify it without my having to take the rather circassious route to this is the position I take with the American Catholic Church in the United States with which I am associated.
Yeah, Brett, I think that's dynamite here in the sense. I do not accept the right of any ecclesiastical, no, once again, I do not accept the right of any, as I said, ecclesiastical official to tell me what I should do in the sphere of my public responsibility as an elected official.
Yes, you're correct. That's a big no-no, huh?
Yeah, so
to the hierarchy.
What he's telling them is it's none of your business.
Right. He's telling the hierarchy that.
Yeah. So I think that when the Vatican was listening to that question and answers, you know what the speech of Mr. Kennedy before was. I think that when the officials in the Vatican have listened to his speech and to the question and answers, maybe they would have raised some eyebrows there. But maybe they thought, oh, it is just a publicity stunt. Yeah, it is just to collect votes. Yeah, it is just part of his campaign. So let's just look first what the boy's got to do when he's in office. Yeah, so I think that is most likely what happened. I know that is a theory, but you see that during a campaign, everybody tells you anything that what the audience usually would like to hear, so that you can get the votes. Yeah, so he was, of course, demanding to have the amount of votes he needed badly for the presidency, and that's a big thing here at the moment. I do not accept the right of any ecclesiastical to tell me what to do. Stay out of my business.
I would be glad to state to you that no one can direct me in the fulfillment of my duties as a public official under the United States Constitution.
We appreciate your forthright statement. May I say we have great admiration for you. But until we know that this is the position of your church, because there will be many Catholics who will be appointed if you are elected president, we would like to know what that they, too, are free to make such statements as you've been so courageous to make.
Well, let me say that anyone that I would appoint to any office as senator or as a president would, I hope, for the same view of the necessity of their living up to not only the letter of the Constitution, but the spirit. If I may say so, I am a Catholic. I've stated my view very clearly. I don't find any difficulty in stating that view. In my judgment, it is the view of American Catholics from one end of the country to the other, because as long as I can state it in a way which is, I hope, is satisfactory to you, why do you possibly doubt that I represent a viewpoint which is hostile to the Catholic Church in the United States? I believe I'm stating the viewpoint that Catholics in this country hold towards the happy relationship which exists between church and state.
Oh.
Isn't that something?
A happy relationship which exists between church and state, but not between the Roman Catholic Church and the state of the United States, if the United States would be a Protestant country.
Well, let's just say,
is he admitting that the United States are already a Catholic country? Then I could understand why he's talking about the happy relationship between church and state. And that can only be happy if the Roman Catholic Church is in power.
Well, maybe this is an exoteric way of saying it, Michael, not an esoteric one. Or, I don't know, was Kennedy ignorant of something?
No, but it seems a little bit like double talk. Yeah, he says the church shall be out of my business. Yeah, that it does not affect me. Let get out of my business. And at the same time, he says there is a happy relationship which exists between church and state. Yeah, but in what regard?
Well, there is a problem, because we're not differentiating between the Roman Catholic Church of, the Vatican compared to the American Catholic Church, which is much different.
Okay, that could very well be, because otherwise I have a hard time understanding what he's actually talking about.
Yeah, because the American Catholic Church is not the same. It is not the same.
Thanks for clearing that up, because you see that we have to take it as it is. Kennedy studied politics, so he absolutely knows rhetorical things, sophistry and all the things. So he knows what he has to say without hurting anybody.
Right,
and
right. Remember this sentence here in the center of the paragraph. In my judgment, it is the view of American Catholics.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, so he's specifically addressing American politics and American Catholics being a happy church and state. Which
so thanks for clearing.
Isn't necessarily true, but in his case, I guess it was.
Yeah, but you see, that would suppose that the American Catholics are independent from Rome.
Correct.
Because it's the hierarchy nevertheless stays. So the hierarchy says that the Pope is higher than the cardinal.
Right. It's an exoteric versus esoteric thing, because on the face of it, yes, it is separate from the Church of Rome, but on the inside, it is not. Okay?
Yeah, that's my point.
And I think the death of Kennedy proved that.
Yeah.
They had to kill him because he was going too far.
Therefore, I think that this interview here is key to understand what problem Mr. Kennedy faced before and during his presidency. So let's move on. Let me ask you then, sir, do you state it with the approval of the Vatican?
I don't have to have approval. I don't have to have approval in that sense. I have not submitted my statement before I read it to the Vatican. I did not submit it to Cardinal Cushing. But my judgment is that Cardinal Cushing, which is the cardinal from the diocese from which or of which I am a member, would approve of this statement in the same way that he approved of the 1948 statement of the bishop. In my judgment, and I am not a student of theology, I am stating what I believe to be the position of my personal position, and also the position of the great majority of Catholics across the United States. Again, American Catholicism, not Roman. I hope that the other countries may someday enjoy the same happy relationship of a separation between church and state, whether they are in Catholic countries or in non-Catholic countries. It seems to me that I am the one that is running for the office of the presidency and not Cardinal Cushing and not anyone else.
Okay, so here I have to make a break. He's talking now again of the separation between church and state.
I do not propose also to ask Cardinal Cushing to ask the Vatican to take some action. I do not propose to interfere with their free right to do exactly what they want. There is no doubt in my mind that the viewpoint that I have expressed tonight publicly represents the opinion of the overwhelming majority of American Catholics.
In regard of the American Catholics, because he says across the United States, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so sentence before, he says, I believe I'm stating the viewpoint that Catholics in this country are taught the happy relationship which exists between church and state.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Would the phrase walking on thin ice fits?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, comment, we would like very much for the Cardinal to make the same statement.
Oh, because they know the Cardinal's not going to have the same
Cardinal
statement.
is not very pleased, I think, yes.
I think not.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Michael.
Mm-hmm. Senator Kennedy, I am K.O. White, pastor of Houston's Downtown First Baptist Church and former pastor of Metropolitan Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. Let me return for a moment to the matter of the Chaplain's Chapel, because there will be some questions raised, I'm sure, and we would like to have just a little further statement from you. Today I had a telephone conversation with Dr. Poling and received this telegram from him. I'm sure you would like to clear this matter up. Let me read briefly from this telegram. The Memorandum on Religion as an election issue prepared by Senator Kennedy's associates has a section on the polling incident. The section contains serious factual errors. I believe the senator will wish to correct the errors, or that he would wish to withdraw that section. The original draft of the program of the interfaith dinner held in the Bellevue Stratford Hotel on December the 15th in 1947 identified Mr. Kennedy, then congressman from Massachusetts, as Honorable John F. Kennedy, congressman from Massachusetts. Mr. Kennedy was never invited as an official representative of a religious organization, nor indeed as the spokesman for the Catholic faith. No speaker on that occasion, Catholic, Jew, or Protestant, was identified by his faith. When 2 days before the dinner occasion Mr. Kennedy cancelled his engagement, he expressed his regret and grief and stated that since His Eminence, the Cardinal, requested him not to come, he, as a loyal son of the Church, had no other alternative. Therefore, it was necessary to destroy this first program and to reprint it.
Now, I will state again that the words I used are a quotation from the Reverend Poling's book, quote, Spokesman for the Catholic Faith, unquote, a book which was produced about a year ago, which first discussed this incident. Secondly, my memory of the incident is quite clear. In fact, it's as good as Reverend Polling's, because when the matter was first discussed, Reverend Polling stated that the incident took place in 1950, and it's only in the last 2 months that it had come forward that the incident took place in 1947. Thirdly, I never discussed the matter with Cardinal Doherty in my life. I've never spoken to the Cardinal. I first learned of it through Mr. Reardon, who was my administrative assistant, who knew that who a Mr. Doyle worked for the National Catholic Welfare Conference, who stated that there was a good deal of concern among many of the church people in Philadelphia because of the location of the chapel and because no service would ever be held in it because it was located in the basement of another church. It was an entirely different situation than the one that I had confronted when I first happily accepted it. Now, there were 3 speakers. Kennedy was one of them. Taft was the second. Senator Lehman was the third. I don't think I've misstated that one was supposed to speak for the Catholic faith as a spokesman in Mr. Polling's words for the one for the Protestant faith and one for the Jewish faith. Now, all I can say to you, sir, is this chapel, I was glad to accept the invitation. I did not clear the invitation with anyone. It was only when I was informed that I was speaking, and I was invited, obviously, as a serviceman, because I came from a prominent Catholic family, that I was informed that I was really there in a sense without any credentials. The chapel, as I have said, has never had a Catholic service. It is not an interfaith chapel, and therefore, for me to participate as a spokesman in the sense for the Catholic faith, I think would have been an erroneous impression. Now, I've been there 14 years. This took place in 1947. I had been in politics probably 2 months and was relatively inexperienced. I should have inquired before getting into the incident. Is this the best that can be done after 14 years? Is this the only incident that can be shown? And this was a private dinner. This was not a public dinner. This was a private dinner. This did not involve my responsibilities as a public official. My judgment was bad only in accepting it without having all the facts, which I wouldn't have done at a later date. But I do not want to say that I've been there for 14 years. I have voted on hundreds of matters, probably thousands of matters, which involve all kinds of public questions, some which border on the relationship between church and state. And quite obviously, that record must be reasonably good, or we wouldn't keep hearing about the polling incident. In addition, I don't mean to be disrespectful to the Reverend Polling. I have high regard for his son. I have high regard for Dr. Polling. I don't like to be in a debate with him about it, but I must say, even looking back, I think it was imprudent of me to accept it without more information. But I don't really feel that it demonstrates unfitness to hold public office.
The reason for our concern is the fact that your church has stated that it has the privilege and the right and the responsibility to direct its members in various areas of life, including the political realm. We believe that history and observation indicate that it has done so. And we raise the question because we would like to know, if you are elected president and your church elects to use that privilege and obligation, what your response will be under those circumstances.
If my church attempted to influence me in a way which was improper, which affected adversely my responsibilities as a public servant, sworn to uphold the Constitution, then I would reply to them that this was an improper action on their part, that it was one to which I could not subscribe, that I was opposed to it, and that it would be an unfortunate breach of and interference with the American political system. I'm confident that there would be no such interference. We've had 2 Chief Justices of the Supreme Court who were Catholics. We've had 3 Prime Ministers of Canada in this century. I've already mentioned Mr. de Gaulle and Mr. Ardenauer. My judgment.
This is the Mr. de Gaulle is the French Prime Minister, and Mr. Adenauer is the German Chancellor. They are both Catholics. So,
my judgment is that an American who is a Catholic, who is as sensitive as a Catholic must be, who seeks this high office, has expressed to the pressures which whirl around us that he will be extremely diligent in his protection of the constitutional separation. Oh, excuse me, that he will be extremely diligent in his protection of the constitutional separation.
Yeah, you see, that is more or less, that is another confirmation of Kennedy, that he says that, they should get out of his office, so that he would not have any interference from the church. I was opposed to it. So he was in opposition to the church if the church would try to influence him. Of course, he has to say that to calm down the doubts of the Protestants here. This is more or less a Protestant or economical event here. Yeah, so I don't know if he would have used the same words if it would be a public broadcast on what else for the general public. But interesting, you see that they're already in the 1960s. There had 2 Chief Justices of the Supreme Court who were Catholics. And 3 Prime Ministers of Canada in the century. Yeah, as I always said, that Canada is the Great Britain of the New World. Okay, so yeah, and then the answer is quite humorous. We would be most happy to have such a statement from the Vatican. Yeah. So. The narrator says, because of the briefness of the time, let's cut out the applause. Senator Kennedy, B.E. Howard, Minister of the Church of Christ. First of all, I should like to quote some authoritative quotations from Catholic sources and then propose a question. So, now comes a quote. Quote, so that a false statement knowingly made to one who has not a right to the truth will not be a lie, unquote. The source is Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 10, page 696, quoting, however, we are also under an obligation to keep secrets faithfully, and sometimes the easiest way of fulfilling that duty is to say what is false or tell a lie. The source is Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 10, page 195. Quote, when mental reservation is permissible, it is lawful to corroborate one's utterances by an oath if there be an adequate cause. Article on perjury.
Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 11, page 696. Quoting again, the truth we proclaim under oath is relative and not absolute.
Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 11, page 696. Quote, the truth we proclaim under oath is relative and not absolute, unquote. Source, Explanation of Catholic Morals, page 130. And then it struck me, Brett.
Yeah.
Albert Einstein?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Let's look it up here, and that's, I think I have inserted it here. This. Let's look it up if I am correctly jetzt here in the line of events. Okay. So let's go into this paper here. Mental reservation, the name applied to a doctrine which has grown out of the common Catholic teaching about lying and which is its complement. According to the common Catholic teaching, it is never allowable to tell a lie, not even to save human life. A lie is something intrinsically evil, and as evil may not be done, that good may come of it. We are never allowed to tell a lie. However, we are also under an obligation to keep secrets faithfully. What does Jesus Christ did do anything in secret? No. However, we are also under an obligation to keep secrets faithfully, and sometimes the easiest way of fulfilling that duty is to say what is false or to tell a lie. Yeah.
So much for bearing false witness, huh?
Yeah. Or the father of lies.
Yeah, that's right.
John 8:44. Just recently from the Vatican in Rome, this news release was given from the official Vatican newspaper, and I'm quoting that of May 19, 1960, Tuesday, stated that the Roman Catholic hierarchy had the right and duty to intervene in the political field to guide its flock. To intervene in the political field. Interesting, huh? That in 1960 they came up with that. Interesting, huh? The newspaper rejected what is terming, quoting, the absurd split of conscience between the believer and the citizen. However, Observatore Romano, isn't that the newspaper of the Catholic Church?
Should be, yeah.
Yeah, made it clear that its stern pronouncement was valid for Roman Catholic laymen everywhere. It deplored the great confusion of ideas that is spreading, especially between Catholic doctrine and social and political activities, and between the ecclesiastical hierarchy and the lay faithful in the civil field. Pope John XXIII recently gave a statement according to the St. Louis Review, dated December 12, 1958, quoting, Catholics may unite their strength toward the common aim, and the Catholic hierarchy have the right and duty of guiding them. Yeah, then from the floor came objection due to time. Question, sir. Of course, to address Kennedy. Do you submit to the authority of the present Pope, which I have quoted from in these quotations?
Well, let me say, in the first place, I've not read the Catholic Encyclopedia, and I don't know all the quotation which you're giving me. I don't agree with this statement. I find no difficulty in saying so. But I do think probably I could make a better comment if I had the entire quotation before me. But in any case, I have not read it before. If the quotation is meant to imply that when you take an oath, you don't mean it, or that it's proper for you to make oaths and then break them, that it is proper for you to lie, if that is what this states, and I don't know whether that is what it states unless I read it all in context, then of course I would not agree with it. Secondly, on the question of the Observatore Romano article, once again, I don't have that in full. I read the statement of last December, which was directed in the situation of Sicily, where some of the Catholics were active in the Communist Party, but I'm not familiar with the one of May 1960 that you mentioned. In any case, the Observatory Romano has no standing as far as binding me. Thirdly, this quotation of Pope John 1958, I didn't catch all of that, and if you'll read that again, I will tell you whether I support that or not.
Yeah, I think we have to rely heavily on the first paragraph here. When he says here, when you take an oath, what does the Bible tells you of to swear?
Not to swear at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't that in Matthew?
James.
James too?
I can't remember what chapter it is.
Yeah, here, Matthew 5:34. Shall we use that?
Yeah, that's good enough. Yeah.
Very much so. Okay. So you see that here in Matthew 5:43, it's been indicated, Brett.
But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne.
Yeah.
And it continues. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very, very important. Yeah, for whatsoever is more than these cometh evil. Yeah.
Yeah, and now you see that they absolutely don't have any problem with that. It seems because they don't know that from the Bible. They don't know that from the Bible. Yeah. When you
let
take
your
an oath,
yea be yea and your nay nay. That's what it said.
When you take an oath, you see that they have to at the inauguration they have to take an oath, and that's absolutely not Christian. So that means that Catholics are not Christians. Or is there any way out? You see that when he's speaking here of taking an oath of his official function as a president, and it has nothing to do with the ecclesiastical oath, of course, which, but as a Christian, I'm bound to the Bible, and the Bible says that we shall not swear. So it is valid for secular and ecclesiastical reasons, I'd say. That's my understanding at the moment. Mm-hmm. I don't know your position about that, Brett.
No, I was just continuing to look at James here, not finding what I was looking for. But anyway, yeah, I'm sorry, Michael. I wasn't really paying attention to what you just said. I
say it regards, because he's speaking of his office here. He's speaking of taking an oath. I think it is about his presidency he would like to achieve. Yeah.
Sure.
To take an oath.
Take a presidential oath. Yeah.
Yeah, but if I understand Matthew 5:34 properly, then Jesus Christ orders, swear not at all. So it is not only limited to secular things, but in general. But because he said neither by heaven nor by the earth. So neither in spiritual things nor in material
Correct.
Things.
Yep.
Yeah. So, okay. So then we agree on that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, church and state there, Michael.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, you have heaven is church, and then throne is the state. Yeah. So that was very interesting in that context. Yes.
Yeah. In another Bible quote, it's been stated then give the emperor what the emperor's is. Can you?
Render unto Caesar what's Caesar's.
Caesar. Yeah. Oh, Caesar is very, very fitting here. Caesar.
That's right.
For me, Matthew 22 says or orders about the separation between church and state. That's my understanding.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Michael. I was again looking at my other screen here. They say unto him, Caesar's, then they saith unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God. Or God's, actually.
So this is a split between material and spiritual things.
Correct. Yep.
So the Bible does not speak of a state of a church. It just says that we are bound to this material world, but we should not partake of this world. So render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, for example, taxes, yeah? And unto God the admiration, the veneration, the things that are God's. So we should not venerate Caesar, and we should not sacrifice anything to God, especially not any material things. Yeah, not build any high altars or so, because Jesus Christ says it has been fulfilled. That's my understanding in it. But it has no correlation to the saying, to the quote of John F. Kennedy at the moment. John F. Kennedy says that an oath, when you take an oath, you don't mean it. That is I don't know whether that is status unless I have to read it in context. So yeah, he says, oh, I'm not aware of it, I have to read it in context. Yeah, so he's not taking any position of it. Yeah. So he says, I would not agree with it when the outcome of that sentence or of that chapter is that lying under oath is okay, so he does not agree with it. But you see that taking an oath is not Christian. Yeah, it's, of course, what do you expect? Kennedy was 43 at the time when that interview happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When I was 43, I did not know many things.
No, that's right.
Especially when you are coming out of a devout Roman Catholic household with a very, very, very prominent father, and you have studied politics. You see that I think that your brain is tossed around.
Right. Yep. Oh, for sure.
So next question. Pope John the 23rd only recently stated, according to the St. Louis Review, date of December the 12th, 1958, quote, Catholics must unite their strength towards the common aim, and the Catholic hierarchy has the right and duty of guiding them. Do you subscribe to that?
Well, now, what I could not describe, or I couldn't describe, guiding them in what area? If you're talking about in the area of faith and morals, in the constructions of the church, I would think any Baptist minister or congregational minister has the right and the duty to try to guide his flock. If you mean that by that statement that the Pope or anyone else could bind me in the fulfillment by a statement in the fulfillment of my public duties, I say no. If that statement is intended to mean, and it's very difficult to comment on a sentence taken out of an article which I have not read, but if that is intended to imply that the hierarchy has some obligation or has an obligation to attempt to guide the members of the Catholic Church, then that may be proper. But it all depends on the previous language of what you mean by quote-unquote guide. If you mean direct or instruct on matters dealing with the organization of the faith, the details of the faith, then of course they have that obligation. If you mean that by that under that he could guide me or anyone could guide or direct me in fulfilling my public duty, then I do not agree.
Yeah, so for I think the third time here, he says that, the church would stay out of his business. Next question. Thank you, sir. Then you do not agree with the Pope in that statement.
You see, that is why I wanted to be careful, because that statement, it seems to me, is taken out of context that you just made to me. I could not tell you what the Pope meant unless I had the entire article. I would be glad to state to you that no one can direct me in the fulfillment of my duties as a public official under the United States Constitution. That I am directed to do to the people of the United States, sworn to do to an oath to God. Now, that is my flat statement. I would not want to go into details on a sentence that you read to me, which I may not understand completely.
Yeah. Now you see the big problem here. In my humble opinion, I don't know how you see that, but he says, no one can direct me in the fulfillment of my duties as a public official. No one is including the Pope.
Correct.
And then he says, sworn to do to an oath to God. To which God? I think that in 1960, when he saw that, I think he was a devout Roman Catholic, and he wanted to please maybe the Protestant or ecumenical audience there. But to an oath to God, well, he studied politics, not the Bible. That is so clear when you listen to him. He says it politely, but he says it now he's confirming it for the third time, so that everybody is aware of that he is not a puppet of the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have any remarks on that?
No, let's keep going.
Question. I understand you didn't explain anything. Gentlemen, we have time. We have time for one more question, if it can be handled briefly. Senator Kennedy, I'm Robert McLaren from Westminster Presbyterian Church here in Houston. You have been quite clear, and I think laudably so, on this matter of the separation of church and state, and you have answered very graciously the many questions that have come up around it. There is one question, however, which seems to be quite relevant, and this relates to your statement that if you found by some remote possibility a real conflict between your oath of office as president, that you would resign that office if it were in real conflict with your church.
No, I said with my conscience.
With your conscience. In the syllabus of errors of Pope Leo IX, in which the Catholic Encyclopedia states is still binding, although it's from a different century, is still binding upon all Catholics, there are three very specific things which are denounced, including the separation of state and church, the freedom of the freedom of religion other than Catholic to propagate themselves, and the freedom of conscience. Do you still feel these being binding upon you, that you hold your oath of office above your allegiance to the Pope on these issues?
Well, let's go through the issues, because I don't think there's a conflict on these three issues. The first issue, as I understand it, was on the relationship between the Catholics and the state and the other faiths. No,
the separation of church and state he explicitly considers in error. We're talking about the syllabus of error here.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Once again, the separation of church and state, the Pope explicitly considers in error, or an error.
Mm-hmm.
Is it right. An error or in error? An error, huh?
I think so.
Okay.
I support that. In my judgment, the American Bishop's statement of 1948 clearly supported it. That, in my judgment, is the view held by Catholics in this country. They support the constitutional separation of church and state, and they are not in error in that regard.
Yeah, and that means that he's regarding the judgment of the American bishops of the statement of 1948 higher than the Pope's authority in the syllabus of errors.
Correct.
So that he's placing the American Catholic Church higher than the Roman Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Question. The second was the right of religions other than Roman Catholic to propagate themselves.
I think that they should be permitted to propagate themselves, any faith, without any limitation by the power of the state or encouragement by the power of the state. What's the third one?
The third was the freedom of conscience in matters of religion, and this also in point 46, I believe it is, extends to the freedom of the mind in the realms of science. This is part...
Yes, well, I believe in freedom of conscience. Let me just, I guess our time is coming to an end, but I believe in it. let me say finally that I am delighted to come here today. I don't want anyone to think, because they interrogate me on this very important question, that I regard that as unfair questions or unreasonable, or somebody who is concerned about the matter or is prejudiced or bigoted. I think this fight for religious freedom is basic in the establishment of the American system, and therefore any candidate for the office, I think, should submit himself to the questions of any reasonable man. My only objection would be, my only limit to that would be, if somebody said, regardless of Senator Kennedy's position, regardless of how much evidence he's given, that what he says he means, I still wouldn't vote for him because he is a member of that church. I would consider that unreasonable. What I consider to be reasonable is an exercise of free will and a free choice is to ask the candidate to state his views as broadly as possible, investigate his record to see what whether he states he believes, and then to make an independent, rational judgment as to whether he could be entrusted with this highly important position. So I want you to know that I'm grateful to you for inviting me tonight. I am sure that I have made no converts to my church, but I do hope that at least my view, which I believe to be the view of my fellow Catholics who hold office, I hope that it may be of some value, in the least, assisting you to make a careful judgment. Thank you.
That was the question and answers of Kennedy. And also in that latest line of sentences here, you see that he's absolutely not in line with the papal doctrine, I think. The freedom of conscience.
That came from the Reformation.
Yeah. So then the fight for religious freedom. And then he also tops that and he says, an exercise of free will and free choice. Okay, not talking about free will, because we know that free will actually not exists when God is always in control, but free will and free choice, and together with this start here with the religious freedom, I think to come to an end on this Q&A session here, freedom of conscience and the separation between church and state, and he did not want to have any interference from the church in his matters. And you see that it all sums up that he, in that regard here, in that speech and on that Q&A session, he's not obedient to the Pope. These are not answers from a devout Catholic. Yeah. That's my summation of it. But you see that also is the topic of his speech, actually. It's not only the Q&A. 1960, before he was elected president, here you see a picture of the first year of the presidential candidates to attend the Alfred A. Smith dinner. The first year, a Catholic candidate on a Catholic dinner. And you see in the background, no one else but Francis Cardinal Spellman, the so-called friend of JFK's father. And on the right side, of course, is Richard Nixon. And it's the same all over again. It's the same all over again. Yeah. Either it is Bush and Al Gore, or it's Obama and McCain, I think it was. Oh, it is Trump and Hillary. Yeah. The laughing guy in the middle, he's the one on top.
Mm-hmm. The cardinal or archbishop, you said, yeah.
Yeah. Cardinal Timothy Dolan. Yeah, you see this as interchangeable, but the hierarchy stays the same. Yeah, it's a Catholic dinner, and they're all attending a Catholic dinner. Obama attends a Catholic dinner. Kennedy attends a Catholic dinner. Okay, that's no big deal. Clinton, Trump, all having a nice dinner. Yeah. The first dinner was held in 1946 by Cardinal Francis Spellman in honor to the memory of Alfred A. Smith. So the church was supporting a political candidate. What about the separation of church and state? Yeah, and the first pair were The first pair was John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, the first pair of candidates to elect that election year. And I would like to close it down with that picture here, that you really see that there is an influence of the church even in 1960. And I think that the speech or the Q&A of Mr. John F. Kennedy got him in big trouble afterwards. For me, this is one of the key things that you really see, that on the one hand, he was a devout Catholic to a certain degree, maybe not that devout as his brother, his deceased brother, or maybe not so devout as his mother and his father. And on the other hand, he has the obligation to serve the state according to the Constitution. And that's a very big split. So I think that John F. Kennedy was sitting between all chairs, that we have a saying here in German. I don't know if there is a appropriate saying in American English. But yeah, you can only serve one master. You can only serve God or the mammon. And so that when he believes in freedom of conscience, I think that was a big no-no from the church, who appears here with a cape. And with the cape, you can also see that as a kind of wings. Yeah, I don't have to say what that symbolism stands for. Yeah, also Dracula comes into flying as a bat when he's approaching people to bite them. But I'm not comparing Mr. Spellman to a bat. Okay, so that's for me today, or that's for us today. Handing it over to my beloved brother Brad. Thanks for having us, and I'm signing off. Hope to see you next time when we go further into the presidency of the Democratic Party candidate and not the Catholic candidate for presidency, John F. Kennedy. Thank you very much, and Maranatha.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think it's very interesting to go into these speeches and dig deeper into the roots of what really did happen back then, and how was this coming about. And yeah, really looking forward to the next session in the realm of conspiracy, which we certainly see today, Michael, as a very active principle at work in the world. So I hope to catch up with you next time. God willing, Maranatha.